Hello everybody, this is Guillermo Arellano. In this video, I am going to show you how to unit test a custom AG grid renderer component in Angular. This video is for advanced users of AG grid and developers who work in the enterprise and leverage Angular for their main JavaScript framework. Just a reminder, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you don't like it, give it a thumbs down. I would like to know what's working and what you are interested in. So please give me some feedback in terms of, what would you like to see? So if you have some comments, also leave them down there in the comments area of this video. And for further help, I will provide some links for resources as well as additional ways for you to contact me if you wish, in order so I can answer some of your direct questions. All right, so this video is going to be organized pretty simply. We're going to start by showing you how to unit test the code. This is not a tutorial, so I want you to just follow along and just listen to what I'm telling you. All of the code I will provide to you. It's going to be in the references section in the description, so you don't really have to touch anything. You don't have to be typing along. I also will not be typing along in this video. I will just jump straight into it. I will copy the code and I would just briefly go over some of the pieces. I'm assuming that because this is an advanced video, you already know some of the concepts of working with AG grid and how to configure it, but I would just briefly just cover them. And at the end of the video, I will talk to you about some considerations and some things to avoid when doing unit tests of your code, of your custom renderer components for AG grid. Okay, all right, let us get started. So I am going to be working. I'm going to show you the video, or not the video, but the finished product of a custom renderer that I will be using. So the renderer that I will be using is called the currency renderer, and what it does, it takes a value that's coming in for the raw data from a JSON file, and call it whatever you want, and then it renders it into a currency, a US dollars currency. So it adds the dollar sign, it adds the commas, and it adds the two-digit decimal on there. So now, how would you go about unit testing this component? So it's very simple. Well, I mean, it's kind of straightforward. So what you do first, let's talk about how this currency renderer is going to be consumed by the renderer component. So this is the renderer component. It's consuming this currency renderer, custom built currency renderer that we created. This is obviously using the iCell render Angular comp interface. And this interface requires us to use a method called AgInit that receives the value params that need to be passed into this renderer. And then we also need to create a refresh method so it can indicate who's going to be refreshing that cell value. Is it going to be AG grid or is it going to be Angular? So it just returns a Boolean value. If we take a look at the template itself for this custom renderer, all we're really using we're using the default currency pipe that Angular provides. So more details about this currency pipe will also be in the reference section. You can take a look at what Angular describes on there. And just to make sure that this code is consistent throughout for anybody who looks at it, we are forcing our currency to be in US dollars. So this is the way that you pass the properties into the currency pipe to set it to US dollars. Okay, so we have this component, this currency renderer component that our team is going to be using everywhere. We have a renderer component that's going to leverage that renderer. So obviously we're going to define a framework components object, and in there we'll pass in a property, a custom alias for that renderer. So we'll just call it currency renderer, and then we'll import our currency renderer component from whatever module you may be using. So in this case, I have the component inside of a shared components folder. Okay, and then obviously this framework components is defined in your when you're calling in AG Grid Angular, you just pass that object into framework components. Okay, cool. So that's simple enough. All right. So from there, you just all you're gonna do is you're just gonna see that content presented on there. So how do we test it? So the way that you would want to test your code for a custom renderer is by performing a black box integrated test for your custom renderers, meaning that you want to be able to stub out a host or parent component that will be running AG Grid and setting up an AG Grid table. It will be calling in this custom component, and then what you're going to be doing is you're going to be essentially running black box testing, just making sure that the configuration of the component and the properties that are passed to it display correctly. And so in your unit test, you're going to do two things. So you are going to create your host component, which is just a stub component for you to consume this custom template. And then in your unit test, you're not going to be mocking anything out. You're not going to fake out the component. You're actually going to be using the TestBed to instantiate your component in the Karma test runner so that you are able to be able to do essentially UI testing, right? So being able to select the various pieces of the component itself and pull them out and then confirm that the rendering of the component is correctly, right? So a renderer just formats the values as like you want them. So you want to validate that the renderer is displaying the HTML content the HTML content correctly for each one of the cell values based on the various different inputs that you give it. Okay, so let's jump into the spec file to see how what that looks like. So we're gonna go over there. Okay, so this is the spec file. So what we're going to do is over here before we even get to our describe, we're going to create a stub, essentially a parent component that will be consuming our renderer. So this is just a simple stub. The template just consists of an AG Grid Angular component, just some basic styles, and then some simple columns definitions along with a very simplified piece of data, right? So I just have really one column is the one that matters, and it's this total property. The thing that determines the use of our custom renderer component is this framework components definition inside of this host renderer. So we pull it. So we just say, hey, for our framework component that we're going to be using in this test stub, we're going to be pulling in our currency renderer component. So use it. Okay. So once we've defined our test host, now we jump into actually defining the test that we're going to run. Okay, so we go into our describe, our main parent describe. In our before each, when we are defining our test bed, we will not be mocking any of the modules or any of the components or external parents. So definitely you will not be using the no error schema, right? You want the real thing. You want the real component to be rendered. So we'll be importing this test currency render component defined in here along with the component under test, the render under test. And then very importantly, typically whenever we are creating our component down here, we run our fixture, the text changes, and we typically let it just do its thing, and we really don't do much else. But because we want to start doing black box testing, just testing the behavior of the component, and we want to wait for our components to be stable and present on the screen, or at least on the fake DOM that's rendered in our Karma runner, we want to run fake async. So fake async, defined right here, is going to force all of the asynchronous actions that are running inside of this before each to complete before jumping into each one of the into the it blocks where we have our tests. So we perform a flush. The flush forces all of the asynchronous asynchronous calls that are being made here, which really it's really this fixture, the text changes that's running. We want to make sure that sucker is complete and working before we then go into one of our tests, right? So one of our tests down here is, if we put a fit, is to match the USD currency is produced in the cell renderer. All right, so let's see how that one looks. And so if we go and run our test, so we run npm run test watch. I'm gonna skip through here just so we can go to the finish mode, okay? Okay, so our tests have completed. We take a look at our Karma test runner, and we see that our test passed. If we scroll all the way to the bottom, whoops, let me just scroll the way to the bottom. When we rendered the component, we made sure that the $100 that were going to be coming in matched the format of the renderer, what we were expecting the renderer to output. We did that by essentially going in here and doing a fixture native element, doing a query for the selector, looking for the third row on that test. And so the third row, by the third row, I mean this one right here. Come on. By the third row, I mean this one right here. So we selected the third item, and then we did an inner text, and we just confirmed that the output was the USD dollar currency for $100. Pretty simple, right? So that was one test. We can do another simplified test here where we modify. So this is another test where we modify the input data of the component, right? So we modify it so that we now set the total to 5.9999, and we're testing to make sure that the USD currency is rounding up. Which of course you would think it would round. Of course you would think it would round up because this is a pipe that was built by the Angular team. So hopefully they already tested this stuff. But I'm just putting this test together just to show you how you would go about in changing some of the properties on your test on your stub component and running those changes, and then querying the DOM. The fake DOM here that's created in Karma, so that you can validate that the render is working correctly, okay? So coming back to this, in the component, we say row data equals this new object value, and we force the fixture the text changes, and we wrap this in a fake async, and we flush it. So we force these fixture the text asynchronous tasks to complete. Now we know by the time we get down here that this query, when we get a hold of the fixture element and we query it for a specific selector, that the selector is stable and has all of the data that we want. We do an inner text and we just confirm, we run the expectation saying that, hey, I want that inner text to be $6 because I want this number to be rounded up. So if we now go back here in Karma and we scroll down, there we go. Not only did the test pass, but we also got the $6 here. Okay, so I think we're good, right? So that is it, and that's as straightforward. That's as straightforward as it gets, right there. So a couple of things that you want to consider. So I typically do not do black box testing for a lot of my components. I I go the white box testing route because sometimes when you are doing black box testing for your components, you're spending a lot of time querying your components, and some of the UI elements, selectors, and the way that the HTML template is structured can change very quickly. So it will make your test kind of brittle. So because of how brittle they get, you're going to be modifying the unit tests very often. So I tend to focus on my unit test. For most of my components, I only do white box testing, meaning that I only test the methods and the logic that's inside of my class, not the template, and just validate that I'm getting the correct results coming out of there. Obviously, there's always exceptions. In this case, whenever you are testing renderers, you definitely want to do black box testing. So you want to test from the outside in. How will a user be using it? So this is effectively DOM testing, just making sure like, hey, I pass in a value, pass in this other value, this is the output. Make sure that the contents on your test bed are stable, query it, validate it. That's it. So yeah, highly recommended it for renderer component. One of the things that you want to avoid, and I highly recommend that you avoid this thing, is that you do not do a significant amount of black box testing for your unit tests. The reason for that is because if you're doing if you're actually instantiating in your test bed the actual component, and you're querying it to make sure that the UI performs or displays correctly for a lot of your tests, it's going to slow down your unit testing a lot. At least that's what I've experienced whenever I've been working on Jasmine and Karma. I don't know about any other testing framework like Jest, but Karma and Jasmine, if you have a small number of tests, you won't see an impact. But if you have 300 to 400 tests or more, like I have, and you are not mocking out your components, and you're doing significant amount of black box testing, your unit tests, which should be fast, are going to end up taking more than 6 minutes, 10 minutes to complete. So focus on doing unit testing on the logic, not too much on the template, except for these renderers for AG Grid. Okay? And I think that's it. Like I said, if you have any questions or concerns, please let me know. Put them in the comments or contact me by the links that I have provided on the description here. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like it, give it a thumbs down. And until next time, I'll talk to you later. This has been Guillermo Arellano. Bye-bye.